Robin Koerner is founder and publisher of WatchingAmerica.com. He writes for the Huffington Post and also started the Blue Republican movement, which is asking Democrats and independents to register Republican for 1 year to support Ron Paul in the primaries. Thanks for joining us, Robin.
Good to be with you, David.
I want to dig into this because I don't know whether I agree with you or not that this is a good idea. First of all, I guess we should get out on the table. Are you independent of whether it makes sense as strategy for Democrats and independents? You are a Ron Paul supporter, right? You like Ron Paul.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, now I am a Ron Paul supporter. I definitely class myself as that. Although I would say, as someone who actually supported Obama, that I think even if I hadn't gone the full way to Ron Paul, I actually don't see any good reason why a Democrat would not want to try and influence the Republican nomination to make sure Ron Paul wins it. But obviously that also is a personal opinion.
Yeah, well, tell me why, because I have my thoughts, and we'll get to that. We can look at it point by point. But why? What is your sense of why a Democrat would want Ron Paul to win the Republican nomination and maybe the presidency? I don't know if you're going even that far.
Well, personally, I'm going that far, and I think the idea of the Blue Republican movement is to go that far. The reason, if you think back to the massive upswell of support for Obama, what the reasons were at the time. The reasons were, there were many, but top of the list was the fact that Americans were killing innocent people in countries that don't threaten us. And that we had a neocon administration that was taking down in short order the basic protections of the Bill of Rights. And we also had cronyism, a lot of it. I don't know if you remember, we were all talking about Halliburton and these no-bid contracts and such like. And then were offered the presidency of hope, and I was hoping that that these issues that are important to me, and I think to many progressives, basic, and we're talking human rights and life. I mean, there really are no more basic issues, I don't think, for progressives. That these would be dealt with somewhat in an Obama administration. But now we see, again, in my opinion, that Obama isn't even Bush light; he's Bush plus. So, I mean, for example, we have the extension of the Patriot Act. We're still starting wars in foreign lands from which we're not threatened. And we have a kind of corporate cronyism that, that makes Bush look like an amateur, except this time it's all Goldman Sachs and the boys at JP Morgan. So
well, you're not wrong per se on any of those things. I don't know that the cronyism we see now makes what Bush did look like child's play. But the thing is to go to this idea of invading nations which aren't a threat to us. Like Ron Paul, I was against the invasion of Iraq. But I think the fact that the idea that it's a means to an end doesn't really play that well with me, nor with a lot of other progressives I talk to. In other words, the reasons Ron Paul was against going into Iraq are because of an extreme right-wing isolationism ideal, which I think that even if it gets us to the same conclusion on Iraq, is not going to put someone, he is not going to be in agreement with me on many other issues that relate to trade, import, export, other issues. It's hard for me to imagine that that's the reason, because he's the anti-war Republican, for progressives to support him.
Well, it's one reason. I mean, it's as important, but no more important than civil rights, and the fact that we need to reestablish the Bill of Rights in this country. Well,
wait a second. Hold on a second, though. Ron Paul is anti-Civil Rights Act. He says it violated the Constitution and reduced individual liberty. He says it did not even help at all to improve racial harmony. It's hard to find people on the left who believe that, Robin.
But do you know why he said that? Do you know what it was specifically about the Civil Rights Act that he has a problem with?
He says it violated the Constitution.
Well, true. But do you know in what his main concern about that legislation was?
Well, tell me.
Well, as far as I can see from what he said about it, and I would urge all of your viewers, listeners, to actually look at what Ron Paul says about civil rights, because if you put this in the context, he is I think he's the most robust civil rights candidate that we have an option to vote for. He is concerned, and I should make the obvious connection that the main reason for that is precisely because he is a constitutionalist, which is that chunk of law in which American civil rights are protected. But that's obvious, but it needs to be said. Ron Paul is very much against any kind of discrimination by the state. What he was concerned with in legislation, as far as I understand it, and I cannot speak for him, is that once you start telling people what they have to do with their private property, you've conceded a principle of where you have given a power to government that it should not have. And it might be quite benign if you concede that principle to say, if you own a business, you have to let people of, let's say, any color into your business and provide services equally, which, of course, is a goal that we all agree on. I mean, I think you'd have to be kind of a nasty person to not think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, this is the Rand. This is the Rand Paul argument that he got into with Rachel Maddow, is it not?
Right, but I believe, and again, you'll have to go back to Ron Paul's own words, because I'm not Ron Paul and I am not authorized to speak to him. But as far, when I put this issue in the context of all the things that he has spoken about in civil rights, I think this for him is a government overstepping its bounds into private life issue. He was very clear about legislation that limits or actually prohibits any kind of discrimination by government. So, I mean, this is the thing about Ron Paul. What happens often is his conclusion gets quoted without the broader principles that he is applying to get there.
I totally understand that. And again, I'm not trying to get into a discussion of my personal opinion of whether I like Ron Paul or not. My argument is I just don't really agree with your idea that this is somebody progressives could even have any remote chance of getting behind by switching to the Republican Party for a year. Let me give you just one other example, just to throw something else out here. He's a booster of the Constitution Party, okay, which has a Christian Reconstructionist platform. He occasionally appears at events sponsored by the John Birch Society, which is the segregationist right-wing organization that's closely aligned with the religious right. Again, not my personal opinion notwithstanding, I can't imagine any progressives are going to get behind that. Well,
if you're saying, and therefore Ron Paul is of the religious right, I would say that you're just wrong. I mean,
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is I can't imagine progressives switching party to support a guy that is against the Civil Rights Act for a number of reasons, which you mentioned and which I did.
But he is more pro-civil rights than anybody else we have. I mean, if you were genuinely interested in civil rights, for example, the fact that we're locking up masses of blacks but not masses of whites for drug offenses, just to take one example, which other candidate is dealing with that? I mean, if you want to actually make an argument on civil rights, I mean, that's great, because I would just say, everybody go listen to 20 YouTube videos about everybody running right now, and let's come back and talk about who the real civil rights presidential candidate is.
Okay, but Robin, I'm not saying Ron Paul is of the religious right, but I'm saying, again, your argument that progressives and independents should support him, they are not going, none of the ones I know are going to get behind anyone who appears at events sponsored by the John Birch Society. It's not individually, none of these things are pushing them over the edge. It's just taken all together. You see what I'm saying? He's anti-social security, for example.
I would say you have to look at a man's platform and his voting record and his actions in Ron Paul's case over 30 years. And if you're going to deny all of that based on the other people who support him, I mean, if we're going to judge politicians by the people at the fringes who like bits of their message, then, let's all go home, because we can't vote for anybody.
Rob, I wish we had more time, Robin. What I think my position on this is, if progressives and independents want to support someone that has no chance of winning, I think there's other people they would support before Ron Paul.
Oh, well, you see, that's what I wrote. My last article on Huffington Post was just called "Ron Paul Can Win." And it was a kind of historic look at political phase changes in different nations, mass transitions. I don't know that Ron Paul will win, but obviously, if you're saying that he can't, I mean, if you start from that point, then there's no point even having a discussion, is there?
The discussion is worthwhile. I'm just saying he won't win. That's just my take. We'll see what happens. We will see what happens.
Well, I don't know what bit of divine knowledge you're plugged into that I'm not, but I am not a fortune teller. I can't tell. I'm not a divine. I can't tell.
Right before God told Michelle Bachmann that the hurricane was because of too much spending, he told me Ron Paul wasn't going to win.
Well, you know what? That's the reason to get Ron Paul on the ticket, because the rest of them, as you've just implied, and I agree with you, are terrifying.
All right, Robin Koerner, founder and publisher of WatchingAmerica.com. Check out his writing on Huffington Post. Maybe you'll become a blue Republican. Email me if you like or don't like this idea. David@davidpakman.com. Thanks, Robin.
Thank you, David. I appreciate it.
Okay, take care.